Testing, testing.
That doesn't surprise me. I'm not being able to read the whole thing.
No, you don't have to.
Either
I'll tell
you.
you what it says.
All right, Zach, you're here. You ready to go? Hey, guys. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act of 1975, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided. Should any member of this board have reason to believe this meeting is being held in violation of that act, they should so state at this time. Hearing none, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Karen, roll call.
Yes, Mr. Becerra,
Here.
Mr. Jones,
Here.
Mr. Belasco,
Here.
Mr. Crowley,
Here.
Mr. Gorgone,
Here.
Mayor Mullick,
Here.
Mrs. Reed,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Sheehan,
Here.
Mr. Lundholm,
Here.
Mr. Malloy, Mr. Produces.
Mr. Malloy is not here tonight because he and his wife just gave birth 5 hours ago to their first child.
Hey.
Okay, we have minutes from February 22nd. Motion to adopt.
I'll
A
second.
motion to adopt?
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Lundholm and seconded by Mr. Gorgone. Mr. Belasco,
Yes.
Mr. Gorgone,
Yes.
Mayor Mullick,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Sheehan,
Yes.
Mrs. Reed,
Abstain.
Mr. Crowley, Mr. Lundholm,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Becerra.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we have 2 items for discussion tonight. First is a master plan review of ordinance number 456-2022, an ordinance amending section 525 of the city code regarding vertical datum standards and confirming. That's funny. Confirming the applicability of NAVD 88. And I think I'm going to just turn this over to Greg so that he can give us a synopsis. We may not be voting on this tonight.
Yeah, so good evening, everyone. This was something that we talked about during the reexamination. Some of you new members that weren't aware and weren't on board at the time, but these were, this ordinance, I think, was intended to incorporate those recommendations. It didn't quite do that. I think there's some missing elements of it. So quite simply, our current code relies on elevations and measurements of building heights and first floor elevations based on the 1929 vertical datum. Everything now, after post-Sandy, all the flood maps, the FEMA requirements are all based on the 1988 vertical datum. So the recommendation is to convert our ordinance from 29 datum to the 88 datum. And there's a 1.3 difference in Cape May County in doing that conversion. So the ordinance that is recommended to you quite simply just changed the datum, but didn't account for the 1.3 feet. So on page of my March 17th review, on the first page, items number 30 and 31 were recommendations with regards and how to convert over those numbers. So I would recommend that the planning board send this back to council and ask them to incorporate those recommendations in there. Otherwise, effectively, the ordinance is essentially raising building heights in the city by 1.3 feet, and I don't think that was the intention. So, we're going to send it back to them and ask them to make those corrections, and I think we'll reconsider it at another date.
Do we want to write down, like, according to the ordinance,
Yeah.
on like page 2, instead of being 11 for the second number 2, which should be 3?
Sorry. What? Are you talking about the
The
ordinance?
ordinance
Okay.
itself. So the second 2, which should be 2, 3, and 4 instead of 2, 2, and 3. So number 3 should have, instead of being 11 NAVD, it should be 10 NAVD.
Right,
And-
that's the recommendation would effectively make that 10.
And then number 4 should be, instead of 10 and a half feet, make it 9.5 NAVD.
Correct. And if those corrections would make it consistent with the recommendations in the land use element, numbers 30 and 31. So that's as simple as I can make that.
Well, that, right.
Lou, is that correct with the sea level being 9.5 NAVD for 10 and a half feet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That keeps it consistent with our current 1929 rule.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Would care to make a motion to send it back to council?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, motion by Mr. Jones.
Yeah.
Okay, motion by Mr. Jones, seconded by Deputy Mayor Sheehan.
That's fine.
Is that right? Okay, Mr. Lundholm?
Yes.
Mr. Crowley? Yes. Mrs. Reed?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Sheehan?
Yes?
Mayor Mullick?
Yes.
Mr. Gorgone?
Yes.
Mr. Blasco?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Becerra?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is a master plan consistency review of ordinance number 457-2022, an ordinance amending sections 525 and 417 of the city code regarding expiration and extension of variance approval. This was sent to us. You did not prepare this, did you, Craig?
I did not prepare this. I did prepare a consistency review.
Okay.
I could just talk briefly about it. March 17th, 2022, consistency review for this ordinance number 457-2022. There is no specific recommendation in our last re-exam or any of the past master plans. However, there is language in there that we want to be consistent with the municipal land use law. And that, I believe, is what is driving the ordinance change with regards to this. So I do believe that the board can find it consistent because of that. And I only had one recommendation. I noticed that this is a change of section 417, which governs the procedures for site plan approval. There is also a section 445, which governs subdivision approval. So if they're talking about variance could be granted for either site plans or subdivisions, the city council may want to consider making that change for both of those sections. That was the only recommendation I had, so. And the board is allowed to find it consistent, and they're also allowed to make recommendations, so I would open it up to the board to see if there's any discussion or further recommendations with regards to that.
I had one quick question on this, and I don't know if it's for Craig or Rich. On page 2, under 52587, section D, where it says that it will lapse unless a building permit is secured. Could we have that unless a building permit is applied for? I foresee a scenario where, say somebody applies for a permit and the construction office either loses it or just doesn't act on it in a timely manner. I would hate to see a property owner lose their extension or their ability to have a variance just because we didn't act soon enough. If they could prove that they made application to the construction board or construction office.
In conjunction with that, actually, paragraph A, I sort of on the same wavelength that said that the variance permitting construction or alteration of buildings shall expire unless the applicant has secured a building. Same thing. Is that what you're talking about, is A?
Yeah, but then the verbiage, I guess it goes all throughout. I didn't even notice A. It's on D.
It's on D
And
as
then I
well.
found it again on page 4 under G. It shows up again.
I mean, I agree with Lou's scenario that if somebody knows they have something coming up and they've applied for it, and the city fails to act, then that should not shame on the person. It's shame on the city or the department for not. So if you substitute the language, applied for a building permit as to secure a building permit, then at least the process has time to work.
I mean, this is already in effect.
No, it's not.
What does
Yeah,
the
this
municipal
is-
land use law say
Wasn't this
about
already, this is not all new. The only thing that was new was what, part 3.
No, this whole section is new. This whole section of 87 is new.
I was under the impression only number 3 was new,
No,
because it's only the bold and underlined.
but that's under section 417.5. I believe I'm right on that, Craig, aren't I? This is not in there.
I think it's already in there.
Yeah, this is already
I think the last
established.
section is
The only
the
thing we
one
were
that's being
changing is what's bold, which is this. This is the only thing
Actually,
we're adding.
No. I think the whole section's new, at least.
The whole section is,
It says new section at the
Yeah,
top,
I-
doesn't it?
yeah.
I recently just printed out the ordinance again, and 87 is not even in my ordinance.
new section.
What is? So 87 would be a new section.
Correct.
I think the addition to 417-5 is that underlying
Paragraph
old
3,
section.
right.
Right. And then 417.6 has another added section.
I wouldn't change that language, but I'm not a policymaker, but I'm just telling you. First, I think, and this is not exactly in my wheelhouse, but I think a building permit has to be a request for a building permit has to be acted upon within 10 or 14 days, no matter what. You have to go up or down on a building permit within a certain period of days after it's applied for, do you not?
And then it's automatically denied.
Right, but then you have the right to appeal it.
Right, so you could, through that scenario, you go and you apply for a building permit, they don't act on it, and it's automatically denied, and then not only are you denied the building permit, now you're also denied, your variance is denied.
Right.
And
Well,
not,
no, wait, hold on.
and in addition to that,
Let me
Okay,
just finish my
okay.
thought. Okay, so you apply for a building permit, and they have to act on it a certain amount of time, and then it's deemed denied, and then you have the right to appeal it, either to the Construction Board of Appeals, or
Right.
if it's a zoning issue, then to the zoning board. So that problem where it gets sat on for a period of time it really can't happen. One or two, something has to happen. The problem with just making an application is this. Suppose that in those 2 years, they know that they have to revise their plans in accordance with the approval, okay? And they're coming up on the deadline, and they figure, well, they just submit the ones that are the wrong plans. And it gets denied because it's not consistent with the approval. They say, well, we applied. So I think you have a duty within the 2 years to get your stuff together so you get approved for a building permit. And if you wait till the last day and you don't have it together and you apply and you're denied because you didn't do the things you need to do for a building permit, well, then that was poor planning, makes poor performance. So I just think the danger is just applying, it can be terrifically deficient, and you can say, well, I applied. And now where are you? Did things
Well,
extended?
I can tell you practically what happens a lot of times is the construction office, when they're under the gun to get something approved, they'll find that something's missing and send it back and say, now you've got to reapply, and then you've got another, and then it starts the clock ticking again. But if you don't get your permit, then you're dead in the water, because they've sent they sent it back saying they didn't have time. I've seen where they don't have time to review the applications. Sometimes they're swamped.
Okay,
A
well,
lot of times-
then,
a lot of
then
times
why
it's
don't
smart.
you, then the recommendation maybe is if, and, you know, it can be, if a building permit that's submitted before 2 years is later denied, you have an extra 30 days to get it done. But I mean, to just say any application you put in defeats the 2-year expiration, to me, that's too easy. That's,
Well, but I have seen, it happens a lot. I've seen where plans come in for a, and not even for this, but for a building permit. And it takes 4 months to get a permit.
I've
It's,
never-
it's, I've seen it.
okay.
I'm just, and it's because they get swamped and, am I wrong?
I've experienced that.
Yeah.
No, but what I'm saying is if it takes 4 months and then it's denied, you have 30 days from when it's denied to get it right.
So that's the language you'd prefer to put in there?
I just don't see the point of having something
open-
expire
open-ended?
if you can defeat it by just filing any deficient building permit application. You're
Well, there's
focusing on
got to be a
taking-
way to protect the property owner and at the same time not hamstringing the city or just having an open-ended, you know, to protect both of them.
Oh, yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm just giving you the danger of just any old building permit that's deficient defeats the 2 years. I'm just saying that, to me, that seems poor legislating. So I would send it back with a recommendation that they consider changes that address the fact that you may submit a building permit within 2 years and not actually secure it within the 2 years. And then what happens? And
Well, and sometimes it's not, sometimes you're not even looking for a building permit. Sometimes you're looking for an extension of an approval. That's
well, they can apply for that.
That's why the language is in there. To apply-
Right, so if you
apply
think you
for it.
might not get, well, that's a whole different thing, that's a different issue. But what I'm saying is, people can, if just filing a building permit that is deficient, that's rejected legitimately, I mean, you're presuming they're gonna hold on to it and then reject it for some stupid, I'm saying, sometimes people put in building permit applications that are terrifically deficient, like they don't have a sketch of what they're doing, or they have no engineering and they're building a sky bridge. So to say that that defeats the 2 years, to me, is imprudent, so I would just ask.
Let's
the
be
common-
clear, we're talking about variances. We're not talking about building plans. This is for
That's for
extension.
your building permit.
This is for, this is for, all variances shall expire unless a building permit is secured.
it.
So, but it's applying to the variances, that, the permit is the,
But no, but you have a variance to build a house, 3 feet from the side
right,
yard,
right,
okay? And you sit on that for 1 year and 11 months.
right.
And then you say, oh no, I'm coming up on the 2 years. And then you take a napkin, you draw a picture of a house, and you submit it for your building permit. And you, right? I mean, this happens. I mean, and then it gets denied because they say, there's no engineering, there's no plans, there's nothing in this. What happens?
But, like,
They get another 2 years, you're saying?
No,
I don't
no,
know.
No.
they don't, it's, that's the open-ended part of it.
That's why I'm
So what
saying,
you're saying, there should be some kind of a time constraint that if they have applied and the city hasn't acted on it, then they get another 30 days or 45 days or whatever it might
something to address your concern, that you apply in good faith, and then, you know, within a year and 10 months, you apply, and then in 26 months, 4 months later, you get a a denial for some reason. And now, oh my God, I didn't get my building permit within 2 years, so I don't know.
Wait, what, Ricky?
If you have to get a variance, haven't you already applied?
But it's got a 2-year life.
No.
We grant variances without seeing building plans all the time. They don't even exist.
There is.
So I would just tweak it so that if you apply less than 2 years for a building permit and it's ultimately denied, you have 30 days to take corrective action or something.
So even after the 2 years they do it just before the 2 years, it gets denied right after the 2 years, they have 30 days to appeal that or resubmit, but are they still then within the valid window where they don't have to come back for an extension?
I thought
That's what this,
that's
that's what.
Is the language, is the language in the land use law, is there language relating to this in that land use law?
You would think that somebody would have.
I mean, I don't want to complicate this issue.
That's where the inconsistency was between our ordinance and the land use laws, I thought.
So they could apply the day before for the permit, and they're good.
I thought the purpose of this was to have a sunset provision on your variances, which you're allowed to have, but which you're not required to have. So how you construct that, I think, is up to you. I'm telling you that normally this shouldn't happen. If you apply for a building permit, there's 14 days or some relatively, relatively short amount of time that they have to react to it. I know it's being said that it's deemed denied. I'm assuming that that's the reaction to that, and then you can appeal. So I think you've, you know, and then if you ultimately secure it, you win your appeal, then I'm sure you're fine.
What you're appealing is the issuance of the building permit.
And then you win, it should have been issued, so you
But
should have
then,
secured it.
but then does that mean the variance still is?
Yes, I would say it does, because you should have secured it, it's not your fault, you didn't secure it, it's their fault. But the concern I'm reacting to is you're saying, well, sometimes you submit it and 4 months later they get to it. Okay,
Right,
well,
correct.
if that's the way it works, then I guess it's gonna come up a lot, because,
So you think the language secured protects everybody? Because at that point, if it was denied, then he can appeal that, right? Is that what you're saying? And he would,
Only if you're denied.
if it was denied improperly.
If you don't file, then.
well, that's different, I get
Yeah.
it.
Can I ask a question? So during COVID, a New Jersey planner sent a lot of literature about variances and when they expire, and they specifically said that a variance runs with the land. Does that mean you're only protected with your variance if you've submitted a building permit application?
This will change that rule. So if you had a vacant piece of land and you got a variance for a side yard, in theory, that variance lasts forever.
Okay,
Runs with the land. But some municipalities, I think wisely, say you have to build within a certain period of time, or
Okay.
you can sunset. if you
okay.
can. That's what this is doing. The
Thank
question
you.
We're wrestling with is what has to happen before the 2 years? And securing the permit seems consistent with what people are obligated to do normally to preserve an approval, is to go get a building permit, which really shouldn't be that hard. But we're reacting to the fact that I guess it can take months to get a building permit.
Correct.
So what happens? So then you just make it apply. Well, that's okay, but it could get denied in 4 months for like a really good reason. And what does that mean?
Then it's denied.
So,
I don't know.
don't people go?
Yeah,
for
but
a
Then the variance doesn't get
variance, and
extended.
then when they're denied
That's-
the permit, they're told.
Okay.
That's the process. You apply,
I'm not
if it gets denied, the variance dies with it.
Well, I guess I'm reacting to the fact that if you apply 2 months before the 2 years, and they take 4 months to tell you, and then they say, you didn't submit a sealed plumbing plan, and you're like, oh, no, can I get that? And they say, well, no, your permit, your variance expired.
We're probably delving a bit too much into it, but actually, that is generally a lot of times what happens. Each subcode official takes a shot at it, and then it gets sent back, the plans get sent back, and the guy goes back to his architect, redoes them, and.
But that's why I'm saying, I think the thing to do is you have to apply within the 2 years, and if that application gets denied, you have 30 days to correct it and stay within the sunset provision.
You want to write the language?
The term of the sunset is a policy decision. right? It could be 1 year, it could be 3 years, it could be 2 years.
Could I just take a
It's not
stab?
even totally our decision, incidentally. I mean, we're,
But I mean, is that correct? It can be anything that the city decides.
I think so. I mean, I
Right.
didn't prepare this, so I haven't researched it. Otherwise, I would know the exact number of days for a building permit. I just kind of know what's out there. So I know that you're allowed to do this. I don't know if there's parameters for it, but I think it makes sense that they're making it consistent with, 2 years seems to be a number that floats around the MLUL.
Right.
So my guess is that they picked that number. 'cause
That's what I thought too, but
It's permitted.
it just
Chris
seems to
Gillen's
me
worth
like.
Put some thought into
Yeah,
this.
so I mean, but I mean, at the end of the day, the city has to decide what is that sunset? What's that period?
Yes,
So
it could be 5 years.
it could be 5 years. But like, at some point, the applicant is beholden to this and that they're going to have to get their building permit in a timely fashion, recognizing that there is a sunset provision.
Yeah, so I wouldn't do it,
Regardless.
I wouldn't do it 2 weeks before the end of.
Yeah, exactly. So that's,
I-
I have
I just-
one follow-up question to that. So say if your variance does sunset, does res judicata apply? Can you come back to the zoning board or planning board and ask for your variance again?
I think you can, yes.
It makes sense to me that you would be able to do that.
Yes.
Okay. I'm done, sorry.
Lou?
Just, what if, instead of talking about the application, or, you know, it could read something along the lines of, unless the applicant has secured a building permit to commence construction within 2 years, or can demonstrate that they are currently going through the process of securing a building permit.
How about we do this? I'm a book guy, okay? I don't like to guess at answers. What I'll do between now and the next meeting is I'll talk to Chris Gillen-Schwartz, and I'll get inside his head on what he looked at to do this, and I will look at it myself, and then I can tell you, I can have proposed language and, you know the answer to this, because there's no point in me guessing. I mean, if this is a concern, you want to change this, I want to look, because maybe the answer is going to be something like, it sunsets in 3 years, we have to apply within 2 and have your permit secured by 3, or something like that, something that gives enough leeway for the building department and the applicant to not get burned.
Just to make sure you express our concerns when you're talking to Chris.
I shall. I promise.
I think that's a good idea.
What's that?
I think that's a good idea.
Well, I don't like to guess at stuff. It's-
Is everybody okay with that? All right, then we'll table, motion to table the,
Make a motion to table.
Second.
with the stipulation that Rich is going to consult with Chris Gillen-Schwartz.
And what I'm going to say to him is, there was concern expressed about the trigger being secured a permit as opposed to applied. And we want a system that addresses the possibility that it may take a while to get the permit decided on, and they may get denied, and then where are they? So we need to finagle that
Yep.
end date.
Yeah, but I also think with the fact that there's 2 years, you're not just saying within 6 months, allows people 2 years to secure that permit. You know, so, I mean,
That's
That's
what,
where it is now.
yeah, I know, and that's what I'm saying.
I like
I kind
policy
of agree with
making
it
that
because of the
remind
fact that it's, the language is there. If we want to say 2 years and 30 days, you know what I'm saying? To me, like Craig was saying, there has to be some kind of, this is the cutoff, and this is what you need. You know, so I just don't understand why. I'd like, personally like the language in there, because it's, yeah.
There has to be an end.
Well, let's let Chris.
Okay.
yep.
Are we ready for the motion?
Yeah, I think the motion was made.
Okay, motion by Mr. Jones, seconded by Mr. Belasco. Mr. Belasco?
Yes.
Mr. Gorgone?
Yes.
Mayor Mullick?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Sheehan?
Yes.
Mrs. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Crowley? Mr. Lundholm?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Bezare?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, we got absolutely nothing done tonight.
Actually, you did exactly what wait, hold on, in fairness to you guys, you did exactly what you're supposed to do. That's why it comes here first, because if the committee had just done it, who doesn't have an engineer sitting on the board, they would have messed up the datum. So it worked exactly right. And then on the other thing, they brought it here with a bunch of people who deal with construction, and we have an official, And then you said, well, wait a minute, there might be wrong. You did that's why you're asked to review this. You're not just, here's a rubber stamp. So that's exactly what you're supposed to do. So you did, it's not that you did nothing, you did exactly what you're supposed to do.
Can I just ask one question about what you just said?
Yes.
Could you just frame the question that you and Chris are going to answer?
Sure.
What is the question?
It's whether it's appropriate to have the 2 years expire simply because you didn't secure a permit.
Right,
Because sometimes you can apply for a permit.
right.
It can take a few months to be decided, and you can be denied, and now you're past the 2 years. So it may be unfair. So we're going to try to figure out a way to have that 2 years be a deadline, but at the same time, recognize that you may apply and get denied, and figure out a way to accommodate all of those
Right,
concerns.
which addresses the issue that was raised by Lou and maintains the process that's reliable.
That's the goal.
Right.
So that we can come back with a consensus, because there's also people on the board, one votes and one doesn't, who thinks 2 years, you got to get your stuff together, maybe apply in a month and
Yeah.
a year and 4 months and see what happens, but. But we're going to try to find something that doesn't make the deadline mush, but at the same time allows for some flexibility on that.
Correct.
Okay?
Good.
Okay.
All right.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Uh,
Oh, you have-
I-
Okay, go ahead.
One
Thank
thing,
you.
for the good of the board. We have been sued. The Cape Jetty folks feel that we've done everything wrong for the last 6 months, so we have to defend our decisions both on the rejection of the variance request for parking without an identified parking lot. We got that one wrong, according to the Cape Jetty folks. And we also were wrong to deny their
Extension.
request for an extension with no testimony. So we're going to deal with that one as well. So unless someone feels strongly and doesn't want me to defend your positions, my intention is to answer it and defend your decisions. We're allowed to talk about this in closed session if we'd like, because it's a legal matter filed against us, but that's all up to you. So if anybody wants to discuss it privately, we can move to go into closed session, but I think the complaint has been distributed, has it, Karen?
No.
No, okay. Well, it will be distributed to all of you, and you can take your time and read it. But basically, they are saying it was arbitrary and capricious to not grant the application back in December, and
Oh.
want
What was the extension? What was the first thing you said that we were getting sued for?
we're denying the request for the parking variance. with no
Remote
identified-
parking.
Remote parking.
Okay, all right, yeah.
Right, right.
Oh, my God.
They're just going to drive these people's cars
All right, all right, now I get it.
Okay? And because it seemed like a long time since that one, but we actually passed the resolution February 22nd, so they're probably within time for that. I didn't do the math, but I think they are. So we'll send everybody a copy of the complaint. You can all read it at your leisure.
I guess after everybody reads it, then they can decide if they want to do a closed session at that point.
Sure, if you want to do, we will probably, I mean, we can do a closed session and talk about this whenever you want to do it. The appropriate time to do it probably would be at our next meeting, because I still have time to answer. So if you want to do it in 2 weeks, nothing's going to happen in 2 weeks. I don't have to answer this until, a little sticky here, April 18th is when our answer is due. You know, the first date that it's due, sometimes they go a little longer. So at the next meeting, if you all read this and want to discuss it, we certainly can, and we have plenty of time. But really, all the direction I need is to defend the decisions, which I'm sort of obligated to do, given the vote.
I think you are.
But actually, I know that I am. So I guess in theory, you could decide not to defend. You could decide not to be in litigation, and I guess you
Default,
can do
default.
that. I'm not sure of that, but we can do a closed session if you want to talk about it. But
Why don't we all take a look at it, and then we can just have a head count at some point, whether,
absolutely.
Yeah, but it would have to be sunshine, right? You have to put it on the agenda. Yeah, on the agenda.
we put it on there. If we don't do it, we don't do it. We just to cover it. So Karen, make a note about that, just.
Are you
Still
at
on closed
liberty to
session?
tell us why we were wrong, why he thinks we were wrong?
Yeah,
and
you have to
make-
read the brief.
You have
That-
to- you have to re- I mean, it's in there, but I mean, it's that you were arbitrary, capricious, and, and also remember, we talked about the case that said that there was some question whether you were allowed to, whether you're allowed to deny the extension because there are, changes in the zoning ordinance and all the stuff that we talked about. They felt that you should have granted the extension. And on the other one, they said you were arbitrary and capricious for not giving them the parking variance they asked for.
Yeah,
All right, so that's the gist of it.
All right, anybody have anything?
I do, I just have something real quick.
Okay.
And it, again, deals within the flood world. The NJDEP has mandated Cape May and Atlantic counties to adopt new flood damage prevention ordinances, which on its merits is not unusual. It's unusual in the timing because typically it follows a new map adoption. It was voluntary up until about 2 or 3 months ago, and then became mandatory, and they're starting down here. And one of the main issues that we've been having with this ordinance is that it would automatically adopt the rules that are being made at the NJDEP, referred to as PACT, Protection Against Climate Change, I think is the other initial, or I don't know what the T stands for, but, and in New Jersey PACT, it now adopts 5 feet of freeboard on not just homes, but on roadways and parking lots. And they're basically coming down and usurping municipal land use because they're telling us you have to adopt this ordinance or risk being either thrown out of the CRS program or even worse, out of the NFIP. It's pretty drastic.
Is this Cape May
very
County, or
large.
this Cape May County or Cape May City?
Cape May and Atlantic counties.
Okay, all right.
That's where they're starting. They've had this put together for about a year now, and they had it on a voluntary basis for everyone. No one bit in the entire state. So then they decided they were going to go with this mandatory adoption and start down here. So a number of counties, or Atlantic County has adopted a resolution opposing this. Cape May County is likely to do it at their next meeting. It poses a real problem, and if it was only about resilience and it made us more resilient, that's fine. But the process that they've followed completely cuts out local decision making. So I just wanted to make the board aware because I feel that it does affect the land use board, and council will be being made aware at the next meeting.
So is there something we need to do to?
Nothing we need to do right now. I'll seek council's input on this and see where their standings are on it. I do have a sample resolution that I'll be asking council to adopt if they are in agreement with this not being appropriate. So we may have something similar for the board.
Can you email, if you have something that's like reasonable summary, not one of those 480-page government-issued incomprehensible things, but if there's.
You don't want the 40-page NJ pact?
Summary, can you send that to me? Oh, 40
Yes.
pages I can handle.
Yeah, I can forward that.
Send me something on that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that available online, that document?
I'll get you a website down.
Lou, wouldn't all this, like with roads and everything, cause almost flooding to occur?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm just making sure I was,
You'd be building up some
Yes,
of
I'm
your
saying.
roads much higher than the landscape next to it, in some cases.
but that's what I'm saying, it's going to actually cause, roads to flood onto lands and everything, unless everybody starts raising up, and then,
It doesn't make a lot of sense, and this is kind of what happens when you don't vet something through the proper legislative channels. This did not follow your typical democracy type of game plan where it goes through the legislature. It's basically being driven down from the DEP. There's no legislation passed at the state level, and they're looking to get the municipalities to adopt it in the hopes that there was actually, I won't name them, but there was one municipality that did adopt it because, like I said, these things come out on a regular basis and we update and adopt. And if you're not thoroughly reading it and not thoroughly vetting it, and you just, okay, another thing came through, we're going to pass it, and they put it through. So there's actually one municipality that did pass it. And I think they're seeking to undo it at this juncture. And it's not just a Cape May City thing. One of the offshore communities noticed that it requires foundation for mobile homes. So all of the campgrounds would have to build foundations at BFE +5 underneath all of their trailers and campsites.
It's a tree house.
There goes my double wide.
So
Keep us posted.
The
I will.
impact on historic preservation in the city would just be decimated if that were to go through.
correct. Yeah, it would, the streetscape could not be maintained. We'd basically look like Cape Hatteras. So I will keep the board updated as it goes through. I'll get you the short summary, Rich.
Anybody else have anything? A motion to adjourn?
Second.
Good night. Oh, this is,
All in favor? Yes.
Do we need public?
do we need?
Yes.
Did Rick motion? Miss,
Public comment?
pardon me? Oh, is there someone here? Oh, my apologies, I'm sorry.
Scott?
They really do, that they needed that variance and then going for the permit.
Wait.
I didn't quite understand that.
Are we open to the?
Am I wrong?
I guess you did, I'm not sure, because remember, you might not know you need a variance.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
you might not know, but
You need